So have you ever heard of a piece of music called 433?
I have, yeah. It's the one by John Cage, right? The silent piece
Yeah, the silent one. It's famous for being silent.
is more infamous for that, I think. A lot of people consider it a joke or a hoax.
Right, and maybe it was partly provocative. But the thing is, it makes you think. Imagine you go to a concert hall, all these expectations, the hush falls,
Hmm.
and then the pianist just sits there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. No music.
I've seen a video of it. It's pretty wild. People get so uncomfortable.
And that's what Cage was going for, wasn't he? Making us question what we consider music.
He was all about pushing boundaries, that's for sure. But he also said, and this is a direct quote, there is no such thing as silence.
Hmm. Meaning, even when there's no intentional sound, there's always something to hear.
Exactly. Like right now, we might not be paying attention to it, but there's the hum of the AC, maybe traffic outside.
My stomach rumbling.
Exactly. Our own bodies, too. So Cage is forcing you to become aware of all that. It's more relevant today than ever, I'd argue.
I completely agree. In our world, we're bombarded with noise, information overload. But Cage, back in 1952, he was already onto something with this idea of finding meaning in the silence.
It premiered in '52, yeah. Wild, isn't it? Almost 70 years ago, and it still sparks debate.
So for people who aren't familiar, let's break it down. Wikipedia says it's in 3 movements, but no instruments are actually played.
Nope. The score just instructs a performer to be silent. Tacet is the musical term. So it becomes about what the audience hears around them. Coughs, shuffling, even their own heartbeat. That becomes the composition.
Which some people say is genius, others say is ridiculous. But I think there's something to be said for art that challenges norms like that, makes you pay attention differently.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at the Dadaists, the Surrealists.
Yeah.
They were all about disrupting expectations, making people question their assumptions.
Right. And this idea of questioning assumptions, it's not just relevant to art. I came across this blog post by Alessandro Zulberti.
Zulberti, the UX researcher, I know his work.
Yes, he actually uses silence as a technique in user interviews.
Now, that is fascinating. How does he apply that?
Well, he was definitely inspired by Cage. He calls these moments of quiet in interviews tacit moments, like the musical notation.
Oh, that's clever.
Mm.
It makes you wonder, how often in conversations do we jump in to fill the silence and maybe miss something important because of it?
I mean, it happens to me all the time, you know? You feel this urge to keep things moving, to like fill any awkward gaps.
It's natural, right? Like
Sure.
silence makes us uncomfortable.
Exactly. But Zulberti, he uses that discomfort strategically. He says these tacit moments lead to more authentic feedback in his interviews.
You know, it makes sense when you think about it. It's like when we feel that pressure to fill the silence, sometimes what comes out is more truthful, less guarded.
Totally. Like we saw in that YouTube video, intentional silence is a moderation technique. Remember how those expert moderators would just pause?
Oh, yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Those silences felt like forever while you're watching,
Huh.
but they always seem to get the participants to open up.
And it made me realize I'm not that great of a listener. I bet I interrupt people constantly without even realizing it.
We all do it. But you bring up a good point. It ties into something Maslow talked about with his hierarchy of needs.
Oh, right, that pyramid. What was it you have, like, the basic needs at the bottom, food, shelter.
Right, so you have physiological needs, then safety, love, and belonging.
Yeah.
And then it gets interesting because you reach these esteem needs, things like respect, recognition.
Being heard.
Exactly. And when someone gives us the space to truly be heard, even if it's just through their silence, it validates that need.
Which makes us feel understood, which makes us more likely to open up even further.
Right. Zulberti, he gave this example from a workshop. Participants paired up, and for 5 minutes straight, one person talked while the other stayed completely silent.
Whoa, 5 minutes. That sounds like a long time.
It's an exercise in restraint, for sure. But afterward, people said they felt incredibly connected to their partner just from being truly listened to. No interruptions, no judgments.
Wow, that's powerful, just holding that space for someone. It reminds me of what John Cage said about how we've lost the ability to just listen to sound without imposing meaning on it.
He said he preferred the sound of traffic to Beethoven. Can you imagine?
There's a certain beauty in that, though, right? Like, just accepting the chaos of it all, the constant activity of sound.life, basically.
And isn't that what Forfeit 3 is all about? This idea that if we let go of our need to control everything, to analyze and categorize, we might actually experience the world more fully.
So we've gone from the silent piece of music to better listening skills to about embracing chaos.
And personal growth, don't forget personal growth.
It's all connected somehow, isn't it? So we've gone from this silent piece of music to better listening skills to embracing chaos.
And personal growth, don't forget personal growth.
It's all connected somehow, isn't it?
It really is. And, this connection between silence, listening, and personal growth, it's something I find really fascinating.
This connection between silence and personal growth has me really intrigued. Tell me more about how it works.
Well, remember what Cage said about losing the ability to just listen without imposing meaning. Now, apply that not just to the world around us, but like to our internal world, to our thoughts.
Okay, so instead of just hearing the traffic, we're talking about hearing our own internal traffic.
Exactly. How often do we just be with our thoughts and feelings without immediately labeling them, analyzing them, trying to shut them down?
It's funny you say that because I realize I do that constantly. This running commentary in my head, judging myself, planning the next thing. It's like I'm afraid to just stop.
Most of us are, in a way. But imagine if, instead of seeing those thoughts as something to control, we did what Cage did with sound, approached them with curiosity. Like, what if our own minds were that concert hall, full of unexpected melodies just waiting to be heard?
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
It's about cultivating that mindfulness, not just outwardly, but within ourselves. Those pauses between thoughts, that's where the real insight can happen.
So John Cage, avant-garde composer, secret mindfulness guru.
Chuckles, maybe. But the bigger point is, he gives us this different way of seeing, of listening, finding meaning in unexpected places, even in silence.
This whole deep dive has been like that, honestly. Started with a piece of music that's silent, and we've ended up talking about mindfulness, personal growth. It's amazing what you can learn if you just dig a little deeper.
It's about being open to those unexpected connections, right?
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about Alessandro Zulberti, the UX researcher I mentioned, you can find him at alessandrozulberti.com. He's got some really cool ideas about how we can all use these tacit moments, these silences, to communicate more authentically.
Who knows, you might even discover you have a hidden talent for listening.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks so much for this deep dive. It's been really eye-opening.
My pleasure. I always enjoy a good chat about John Cage, especially when it takes us to unexpected places.